disease as such, I want to share few basics or fundamentals, okay, which are very important to understand the disease, right? So as we all know, skin is made up of three layers, okay, three important layers. The outermost being the epidermis, below that is the dermis and subcutaneous tissue. So epidermis mainly gives the barrier function to the skin, and it is avascular, completely avascular. Whereas the dermis, which is underneath the epidermis, supports the epidermis, provides all the nervous and vascular supply to the avascular epidermis, right? And even the epidermis, it is divided further into four different layers. Stratum basal in the base of the epidermis, then stratum spinosum, stratum granulosum, and stratum corneum. So the cells, they uh, differentiate or mature from the stratum basal towards the stratum corneum, as you can see, and this takes time. Usually it is around 28 to 30 days. So the basal cells, they divide and go into stratum spinosum. In the stratum spinosum, they mature. More of the keratin proteins are produced in that layer, and then it goes into stratum granulosum, and then into the stratum corneum, and from there slowly it is shed off. And, slowly it is shed off. So the duration it's taken from the stratum basal to the stratum corneum is around 28 to 30 days. Okay, why I'm telling this is because in psoriasis what happens, this balance is lost. That is, whatever the cells which are growing from below should be shed from above. So for the stratum corneum to be mature, it takes time. So in psoriasis what happens, there is increased proliferation of the basal cell layer, and there is decreased maturation or differentiation and decreased shedding from the stratum corneum. So this turnover time is reduced by 1/10. So it usually takes 28 to 30 days in normal skin. It is reduced to 3 to 5 days in psoriasis. So this is the basic pathogenesis of psoriasis, which you have to understand. So along with these basics, let's start with the psoriasis disease. Okay, it's a pretty common condition, and it is lifelong. There is no cure for psoriasis except one subtype of psoriasis. It is multifactorial. There are multiple etiological factors associated with it. It is inflammatory, obviously, hyperproliferative, as I already said, immune mediated. Okay, also autoimmune, some autoimmune factors are also seen. It affects the skin, nails, and joints, and it is characterized by periods of remission, relapse, and exacerbations. All right. So coming to the epidemiology, how common is it? It's seen that it's seen in 1 to 3% of the population worldwide. More of white people are affected than the Africans and Asians and Indians. So usually in Caucasian population, the prevalence is 1 to 5%, whereas in Asians it is 0.5 to 1%. And even the incidence varies with age. So based on the age of onset, it is further divided in type 1 and type 2. So type 1 is early onset and type 2 is later onset. And there are further differences between type 1 and type 2. This type 1 usually affects, as I said, younger individuals, and there are more association with the other first degree relatives are more, the chances of getting psoriasis in a family is more, and these diseases in type 1 psoriasis severe and recurrent. And the other association like nail involvement or joint involvement, another psychosocial impact is greater in type 1. And also the genetic association is high, that is HLA antigen CW6, also called as SORS1 gene. The association with this is higher. Whereas type 2 is more of a lifestyle disease, like it's commonly seen in 5th or 6th decade, and it is more associated with the obesity, diabetes, and alcoholism, smoking, etc. So it is a mild to moderate type of disease, and it lacks the genetic association. So if you know this about the epidemiology, it is more than enough. You have to remember that it has multiple factors. There is no one single factor, single etiological agent for the onset of psoriasis. As I said, etiology is multifactorial. Genetic, immunological, environmental factors, everything combined together causes this disease. Certain triggering factors are there. I mean, when people with genetic susceptibility who have these triggering factors induced in them, like people who are genetically susceptible and they get infection with certain bacteria, the chances of developing psoriasis is more. So triggering factors like infections, as I said, most commonly streptococci pyogenes, that is group A, C, and G, beta hemolytic streptococci, because they have a protein called M protein, which have a molecular similarity with the keratins present in the epidermis, that is keratin 16 and 17. So it's kind of a molecular mimicry. So autoantigens are produced. So the antibodies against these M proteins, they try to attack the keratins in the epidermis. So that's why it's called autoimmune. Also, other infections like HIV. People having HIV infection, the uh, uh, incidence of getting psoriasis is higher, and also once they get the psoriasis, it's more severe in course. Okay. Other triggering factors are drugs like beta blockers, lithium, antimalarials like drug of the year, hydroxychloroquine, then NSAIDs. So what happens? The disease onset, de novo with these drugs is very rare, but once they have a genetic susceptibility, or if they have a milder psoriatic disease, once you start these drugs, there will be exacerbation of the diseases. So these psoriasis patients, these drugs should be avoided in them. Okay, beta blockers, lithium, and antimalarials and NSAIDs. Other triggering factor is the cutaneous trauma. Cutaneous trauma. Why cutaneous trauma? Because as I said, it's an autoimmune disease. So whenever there is trauma, there is chances of release of these autoantigens. So whenever there is burns, friction, or surgical incision, allergic reaction, radiation exposure, everything, there is trauma, there is injury to the skin, and whenever there is injury, there is release of the proteins inside the cell. So these autoantigens are exposed. There is exposure of these antigens which were previously not exposed in the body. So the generation of autoantigens is more with the cutaneous trauma. Also, stress increases the psoriatic flares. Also, alcohol and smoking is association is more than 2 to 3 times more common with compared to normal people. Okay, so these are the etiology. Coming to the pathogenesis, as I said, genetically susceptible individuals, when these triggering factors they come, and these individuals are when they're exposed to these triggering agents, autoantigen is produced. So these autoantigens, they are presented by the APCs, antigen presenting cells. They'll move into the lymph nodes. They produce certain T cells along with memory T cells. They come into the skin and they release the inflammatory mediators like interleukins, TNF alpha, and interferon gamma, etc., and they cause inflammation. Okay. So when there is inflammation, obviously there is increased vascular, uh, increased vascularity, and also these inflammatory mediators, they also stimulate the proliferation of the basal cell layer. So when, as I said in the beginning, the basics, when I said it takes time for the cells to mature when they move up. In psoriasis, the maturation is, there is no maturation of the cells, hardly any maturation. So this basal cell, whichever they are dividing, they go into the stratum corneum very fast. So usually in the stratum corneum, the cells are dead cells. They don't have any nucleus. Whereas in patients with psoriasis, The stratum corneal layer, they are with the nucleus and less keratin. Usually what happens, these cellular cells in the, uh, the basal cells, as they move up, they lose all their living functions. Like they lose the nucleus, they lose the organelles, they lose, but they keep on producing keratin protein. So when they reach the stratum corneum, the whole cell is filled with nothing but keratin proteins. The nucleus, the mitochondria, everything is lost in the way. So that's why the topmost layer, the stratum corneum, is so hard and rigid. So what happens in psoriasis? All this, the keratin protein is not produced properly because there is no time to produce. So what happens? The functions of all these layers are lost. That is, the function of stratum corneum is lost, and also the adhesion between the cells in the stratum corneum is lost. That's why it forms a scale. So when you see a psoriatic plaque, there is loosely adherent scales. They're nothing but the adhesion between the cells in the stratum corneum is lost because they are not fully mature. Okay, I hope you understood that. Next, we'll go into the clinical features. Coming to the, there are multiple clinical variants of psoriasis. More than 20 different types of psoriasis are mentioned, but most important ones I'll discuss. Okay, most important ones are these five. One is the chronic plaque psoriasis or psoriasis vulgaris. Vulgaris meaning common. This forms around 80% of the all the clinical psoriasis. Most common type is the chronic plaque psoriasis. Then second most common is the gutted psoriasis, usually seen in childhood. Okay. Next is the pustular psoriasis, inverse psoriasis based on the location, and severe erythrodermic psoriasis. Right. Now let's come to the first type, that is psoriasis vulgaris or chronic plaque psoriasis. As I told, most common type, 80%. As you can see in the picture, clinically you can see a round or oval, well demarcated. That is, a clear-cut margin is present between the lesion and the skin. Erythematous, obviously there is red. Papules and plaques, usually plaques. Papules and plaques, as you know, primary lesions, less than 1 centimeter and more than 1 centimeter. Usually the plaques are, usually psoriasis comes in plaques, in chronic plaque psoriasis. Covered by loosely adherent silvery white scales. As you can see, these silvery white scales here. Okay, so loosely adherent silvery white scales. The clinical picture is very easy. Okay, clear cut margin, erythematous plaque. Okay, and with silvery white scales. How is the distribution? Usually it's symmetrical, and there are certain sites of predilection, like extensors meaning elbows and knees. The most commonly involved sites are elbows and knees. Okay, and next common being lumbosacral area and the scalp area. You can see in the picture. Okay, scalp, elbows, knees, and lumbosacral area. It's not that psoriasis affects only these regions. These regions are most commonly affected. Even if there are lesions over the trunk, these regions are invariably involved. Okay, one of the main reasons why these sites are involved is because their extensors more prone for trauma. Right, that is the hypothesis. Because they are more prone for trauma, these sites are most commonly involved. I put few clinical photos for you to see. Okay, clear cut plaques with silvery white scales. Usually, these patients don't have much symptoms. Psoriasis doesn't have much symptoms. Okay, sometimes there will be itching, but the itching will be very mild compared to any other disease. Unlike eczema, in psoriasis, the itching is very mild. Okay. Okay. There are certain signs can be elicited in psoriasis. First one is a Auspitz sign. Okay, what is Auspitz sign? When you take a glass slide or a blade or a key and you scratch the lesion, what happens? This topmost layer of the skin peels off. because they are loosely adherent. As I said, why the reason for loose adhesion is because they are not completely mature. So these scales are loosely adherent, silvery white scales. Okay, when you scratch the scales are can be removed easily, and when you keep rubbing the lesion, the scales are removed, and there will be a clear membrane, and you can see few bleeding spots from there. Few bleeding spots. Okay, those are the bleeding spots are nothing but the dilated capillaries. So this hole from the start of the scratching the lesion with the glass slide till the onset of this bleeding, it's called the Auspitz sign, and it's very a characteristic of psoriasis, right? So this is the Auspitz sign. It's also an MCQ question, easy MCQ question for the exams. Okay, appearance of bleeding points on forcible removal of the scales done by glass slide. There is something called as Koebner phenomenon or Koebner's isomorphic response. Isomorphic, iso means same, morphic means similar morphology. So when there is a trauma, mild trauma over the skin, the new psoriatic lesions will be formed at the site of trauma. Appearance of skin lesions at the site of trauma. Okay, if you understand this word, isomorphic, similar morphology as the psoriasis. There is something called as isotopic. That is different. That is a different disease at the same site is called isotopic. This is isomorphic. Please don't confuse. Okay, Koebner's isomorphic phenomenon. This is also very characteristic of psoriasis, but it is also seen in some other dermatological conditions also. Okay. So candle sign. Candle sign is nothing but when you scratch, it will be like scratching a stick of candle. Okay, like the candle wax will peel off. Similarly, the scales will come off in psoriasis. Sign of the last Hodgkin. Nothing but there is a, as you know, the scales are nothing but stratum corneum, and there is a thin layer of stratum spinosum and granulosum also. That layer is called the last layer because after this layer, it starts bleeding. So the sign, the last Hodgkin. Hodgkin means nothing but a membrane. Okay, the sign of the last membrane, nothing but translation is nothing but that. Okay, so candle sign. All these are signs of psoriasis. Next, coming to the gutted psoriasis. As I said, psoriasis as such is not curable. But this is one such type of psoriasis which sometimes can be curable because it is usually secondary to a bacterial infection. Which bacteria is a beta hemolytic streptococcal infection. So this is usually seen after an onset of upper respiratory tract infection. So after 2 to 4 weeks of an upper respiratory tract infection, an acute eruption of small, less than 1 centimeter. So it is a papule, okay, scaly papule. So round to oval shaped, well-defined erythematous scaly papules are seen. Usually distributed in the centripetal fashion. Okay, usually seen in the trunk compared to the chronic plaque psoriasis where extensor is involved. Here, usually the trunk is involved, like any other viral exanthem or any other rashes of the rashes associated with fever. Uh, so this has a very strong association with HLA-CW6, and as I said, associated with infection of the pharynx or tonsil. And it can be presenting episode of psoriasis in children, occasionally adults. So in some of the patients who get this gutted psoriasis, they in the future they can progress into a chronic plaque variety also. So they need to be followed up regularly. And this type of psoriasis can be treated sometimes, not always, with a course of antibiotic to remove the streptococcal infection. Again, the regions affected are mainly the trunk. Okay, trunk. And you also need to understand that most of the dermatological diseases, if there is the causative agent is systemic, the lesions are usually in the trunk, whereas if it is local, it's usually in the extremities. Like if it is sun-induced polymorphic light eruption, they are usually in the exposed area. Whereas if it is a rash, the secondary to drug reaction, usually it is in the trunk. So that is an easy way of differentiating the rashes in dermatology. Usually the rashes in the trunk are mainly systemic. If it is not in the trunk, they usually are local. Okay. Again, lesions of gutted psoriasis. Okay, small papules, usually papules with fine silvery white scales. Next type of psoriasis is a pustular variety, pustular psoriasis. Usually pustular psoriasis are not seen de novo, usually secondary to something else in a otherwise healthy chronic plaque psoriasis patient. Usually preceded in a plaque psoriasis patient. Sometimes it can also occur de novo without any previous history of psoriasis. It is usually triggered like in patients who are given irritants like dithranol or tar as a treatment. Because of the chronic irritation, what happens, there will be this pustule formation. And also in case of withdrawal of systemic steroids, first of all, systemic steroids are not given. It's contraindicated in psoriasis because of this reason. Once you start systemic steroids, you cannot stop it. Okay, withdrawal of systemic steroids causes this pustular psoriasis. Also, certain infections of upper respiratory tract and also certain drugs can also cause pustular psoriasis in chronic plaque psoriasis patients. Okay, uh, they are usually associated with other systemic symptoms like fever and fever and other malaise and other symptoms of systemic involvement also. And these pustules, whatever we are seeing, those are always sterile. Okay, they are sterile. Doesn't mean that it is infected just because it's pustule. It's a sterile, flat, and it's non-follicular. It means it's not around the hair follicle. Usually, pustules around the hair follicle usually goes in favor of folliculitis. Usually, these are non-follicular pustules, and these pustules may become confluent and produce lakes of pus, large area of pus. You can see here lakes of pus. Okay, so this pustular psoriasis is further divided into different types, generally generalized and localized. This generalized are further divided into erythrodermic pustular psoriasis of Bonson-Busch, annular pustular psoriasis, impetigo herpetiformis. Impetigo herpetiformis is nothing but pustular psoriasis in pregnancy, right? And exanthematic pustular psoriasis. These are all not that important. And localized pustular psoriasis, again, there are two types: acrodermatitis continua of LIP and palmoplantar pustulosis. Okay. Okay. This either it's localized to the extremities or it is generalized and localized types of pustular psoriasis. Next, coming to the inverse psoriasis. Nothing but the area of involvement is different. As I told, in chronic plaque psoriasis, the extensors are involved. Here, the flexures are involved. Nothing but the area site of involvement is flexures here. And because the flexures are involved, their moist area, the scales are not that obvious. So, glossy, sharply demarcated erythema, localized predominantly to the intertriginous areas like axilla, inframammary region, luteal cleft, genitals, etc. Scaling usually minimal or absent because of the moisture, and there might be painful fissures. Okay, fissuring and maceration is also seen in some patients, and they are usually confused with fungal infection, either candidial fungal infection or dermatophyte infection. So when lesions like this appear and you treat for fungal infection, and if after 2-3 months there is no change at all, you need to be suspicious of inverse psoriasis. Similar to this, there is a different type of psoriasis involving scalp also. So based on the site, so scalp psoriasis is also one of the type of psoriasis. So as I was saying, erythrodermic psoriasis it becomes a systemic disease more than a dermatological disease because more than 90% body surface area is involved, and it's usually because of some precipitating factor. Patients de novo, they don't come with the erythrodermic psoriasis. Usually the psoriasis, chronic plaque psoriasis patients, they go into erythrodermic psoriasis because of ignorance. Okay, usually the precipitating factors are there. Most commonly, the patients who are on regular treatment, they discontinue or withdraw the drugs abruptly. They go into a sudden erythrodermic psoriasis called rebound phenomenon. Okay, when they stop the medication. Also, sometimes when we give one of the treatment modalities is phototherapy. So when the phototherapy, if the dose is higher, it causes sunburn type reaction. So when there is sunburn type reaction, obviously there is copnerization, there is a cutaneous trauma. So there will be extensive psoriasis. So mainly it's secondary to something, okay? And other systemic illness and infection may also trigger the erythrodermic psoriasis. So in this patients, the skin is bright red and is covered with superficial fine flaky scales. Here the silvery white scale which was described for chronic plaques, it is not seen here. The thick scales are seen here. And more than that, there will be other associated like lymphadenopathy, fever, hypothermia, tachycardia, peripheral edema, because there are so much scales and the skin is proliferating so much. There is increased protein requirement, and because so much scale is shed, there is hypoproteinemia also. So, peripheral main cause for peripheral edema is hypoproteinemia because so much of scale is almost 9 gram of protein is lost per day in an erythrodermic psoriasis patient. Right. So all the whole body is usually involved. Okay. So I described the 5 different types of skin lesions of psoriasis. That is chronic plaque psoriasis, gutted psoriasis, pustular psoriasis, inverse psoriasis, and erythrodermic psoriasis. So if you remember these 5 types, more than enough. If you are sure about the clinical features about these 5, then further you can go into other different types of psoriasis. Next, I'll come discuss about the nail involvement in psoriasis. So nail involvement in psoriasis is pretty common. Okay, usually 25 to 50% of the patients with psoriasis, they have nail involvement also. And sometimes the nail involvement is seen without any skin lesions also. So some patients come just with the nail involvement. And the most common nail features in nail involvement is the nail pitting of the nail. Here, the pitting of the nail is very irregular compared to the pitting of the nail in alopecia areata, which is other most common differential diagnosis for pitting of the nail. Here, that is very irregular pitting, and other than the pitting, there are other different features also, like onycholysis, meaning onycho meaning nail, lysis means separation. So nothing but separation of the nail plate from the nail bed. As you can see here, this yellow color is nothing but separation of the nail. I'll show a better picture. Okay, and there is also subungual hyperkeratosis. Sub below the nail, hyperkeratosis. Okay, hyper more keratosis. That is increased keratinization or increased proliferation under the nail. So as I told, there is hyperproliferation of the skin. Okay, here there is hyperproliferation of the epithelium of the nail bed. So there is subungual hyperkeratosis, and also sometimes there is complete nail dystrophy. Okay, I'll show you the picture. Okay, this is the onycholysis. Okay, separation of the nail bed from the bed, and this is the nail dystrophy. Okay, other than the nail, even joints are also involved. Psoriatic arthritis. Usually, what happens is psoriatic arthritis is associated with the nail changes. Not always, but most commonly, nail and joint involvements are together. Okay? The prevalence of psoriatic arthritis is around 25%. It's usually seronegative. That is, test for rheumatoid factor is usually negative. It's one of the seronegative arthritis, is psoriatic arthritis. And cutaneous lesions precede arthritis in 60 to 70% of the patients, whereas patients with arthritis de novo can come in 20% of the times. Okay. Clinically, what you see, there is peripheral and axial, that is the peripheral joints, small joints, and axial joints. Axial arthritis, the vertebra, okay, vertebral column is also involved. Arthritis, enthesitis, okay, the fusion of the muscle to the bone. Dactylitis, the whole inflammation of the whole of the digit. And tenosynovitis, that is a tendon and the tendon sheath involvement. So clinically, they can come with joint pain, swelling, stiffness, redness, and reduction in the mobility. Typically, psoriatic arthritis involves the in the small joints, the DIP, distal interphalangeal joint, is characteristically involved. I'm not saying it's the most commonly involved, but characteristically, DIP joint involvement goes in favor of psoriatic arthritis. Right? This is about psoriatic arthritis. So once you have a patient of psoriasis, you think clinically that is psoriasis. So how do we confirm? Confirmation is by skin biopsy and histopathology. You take a small sample of the skin and do a histopathological staining. So what do you see? I'll show the comparative picture. So above you can see in normal skin, you can see this is a normal skin, epidermis and the dermis, and here below is the psoriatic skin. You can compare, the epidermis is thinner in the normal skin, whereas in the psoriatic skin it is thicker, elongated. The ridges are elongated, the dermal papilla are also elongated. Also, you can see the stratum corneum, the very thin layer here in normal skin, whereas here the thick red color stratum corneum. Okay? This is nothing but hyperkeratosis. Also, here the thin stratum corneum, normally they are devoid of any nucleus, whereas here there will be nucleated cells in the stratum corneum. So that is called parakeratosis. So parakeratosis is one of the characteristic feature in the histopathology of psoriasis. I'll show you in this picture. So parakeratosis, okay, so that is but nothing but nucleated cells in the stratum corneum because they are not properly mature. Neutrophilic keratitis or microabscess. So there is inflammatory cells in the dermis as well as they come into the epidermis also, and in the epidermis they will be segregated in certain layers. So when they are accumulated in the stratum corneum, it's called Monro's microabscess. Okay, Monro's microabscess in the stratum corneum. So when these Monro's microabscess they enlarge, they go into pustule formation, which is visible in pustular psoriasis. Okay, so you understand the neutrophil aggregation in the stratum corneum itself will increase in size and form the pustular psoriasis. Also, there is epidermal hyperplasia, okay, increased thickness of the epidermis. Hypogranulosis, nothing but the granular layer is lost because granular layer is the progress from the spinal layer, which the normal differentiation is not happening here. Okay, so there is hypogranulosis. Suprapapillary epidermal thinning. So these are the dermal papillae, and just above the papillae, the epidermis is very thin. Okay, that is nothing, that is called suprapapillary epidermal thinning. And dilated capillaries and edema of the papillary dermis. So dilated capillaries, obviously there is inflammation, there is dilated capillaries and other inflammatory infiltrates in the dermis. Yeah, I hope you understood this. So if you can relate this to the normal clinical picture of psoriasis and histopathology, you can know the reason why all these things are happening. So Auspitz sign, if I can describe the Auspitz sign, clinical Auspitz sign here. So the scales, when you scrape the glass slide, the scales which come off, they're nothing but the loosely attached layers of the stratum corneum. And there is a shiny Berkeley's membrane we call after you scrape the scales. That is nothing but the very thin epidermis. So when you scratch again, this thin epidermis, suprapapillary thinning, will show the visible dilated capillaries. That is nothing but small tiny bleeding spots in Auspitz sign. So that is the clinical and histopathological correlation, right? So once you're clinically and histopathologically you're diagnosed that this is psoriasis, what do you want to do? So management. So there is no single treatment for psoriasis. There is no ideal treatment for psoriasis. The treatment differs based on the age of the patient, the severity, the area involved, and also the adverse effects and the cost of the treatment and patient compliance. So in mild type of cases, only topical therapy is enough. Whereas in moderate to severe patients, you need to give along with topical phototherapy and systemic therapy. What are the drugs used in topical therapies? The most commonly used drug is the topical corticosteroids. These are the most effective as well as most abused drug in dermatology. Topical corticosteroids, they have the anti-inflammatory, anti-proliferative, immunosuppressive, and vasoconstrictive effect. So all these effects are helpful in psoriasis. They're also the first choice of treatment in children, and also it's comparatively safer in later terms of pregnancy, and also safe in breastfeeding. So main side effects is the skin atrophy on prolonged usage, skin atrophy and striae formation at the site of application, and also in patients with larger surface area. When steroids are applied in the large surface area, it will be absorbed. So it might lead into HP axis suppression also, just like systemic steroids. And these topical steroids cannot be stopped abruptly. There should be gradual reduction of dosage to avoid rebound of the disease. Right. So topical corticosteroids are the mainstay, cheapest treatment. Other than that, previously the TARs and dithronol anthralin have been used, but now rarely used because of their irritation and other side effects. Topical vitamin D analogs have been in work right now, calcitriol, tacalcitol, and calcipotriol. They act by induction of they cause differentiation of the keratinocyte. As I said, there is no proper time for differentiation of the keratinocytes from basal to top layer. So they stimulate the differentiation and maturation of the keratinocytes. Also, they have immunomodulatory effects. Other topical therapies like emollients or moisturizer. These are the safest treatment option because they don't have any side effects, and they are symptomatic treatment. Nothing but symptomatic treatment. They decrease the symptoms, that decrease the itching, and also they decrease the scale formation because they hydrate the skin. Okay. And topical retinoids. These topical retinoids are nothing but they are vitamin A derivatives. They also act by regulating the proliferation and differentiation. Okay, they slow down the proliferation of the cell and slow down the desquamation of the keratinocytes. Keratolytics, nothing but salicylic acid and urea. They are not used alone. They usually are used as a adjuvant along with other medications because they improve the symptoms and also they improve the penetration of other drugs inside the epidermis. So keratolytics are not the mainstay of the treatment. They decrease the scales for sure, but they are not used alone. In moderate to severe patients, severe cases, we can use phototherapy. Nothing but ultraviolet radiation is directly applied on the skin affected area. So there are three different types of methods by which we give ultraviolet radiation. UV radiation can be divided into three subtypes, like from the spectrum. UVA is usually from 340 to 400 nanometer, and UVB being around 290 to 340 nanometers. So even in that UVB, narrow band UVB takes only a single nanometer wavelength of the ultraviolet radiation, that is 311. So based on the what do you say, frequency or wavelength of the ultraviolet radiation we give, can divide into UVA and B. So the main mechanism of action of this ultraviolet radiation is they interfere with the DNA synthesis. So they interfere with the synthesis of proteins and nucleic acids, and so DNA synthesis is reduced. So there is decreased proliferation of keratinocytes. Also, there is decreased proliferation of keratinocytes as well as the inflammatory cells. And Langerhans cells, these are nothing but the antigen processing cells in the skin, APCs. So even this number of Langerhans cells is also reduced with ultraviolet radiation. So because of this, there is improvement of the skin lesion. All right. So there are acute and chronic side effects of phototherapy, obviously. Acute side effect, they are nothing but because of the inadequate or improper exposure. There is erythema, itching, sunburn kind of lesions. Okay, and because of this, the severity of this ultraviolet radiation, protective eyeglasses are always recommended in patients who are undergoing phototherapy. And long-term side effects include photoaging and carcinogenesis. And these patients should be followed up regularly to evaluate for any skin cancer also, right? So that's about phototherapy. Now let's discuss about the systemic treatment for psoriasis. In usually moderate to severe cases, systemic treatment is very important. Okay, and this systemic treatment now has been further divided: traditional systemic treatment and biologicals, because recently, because of the outset of the so many biologicals are introduced in the market, so you can give either traditional or biologicals. The main side effect of biological being the cost, right? Uh, Systemic treatment, there are few drugs. One of the important drug is the methotrexate. Okay, methotrexate is a cornerstone in treatment of moderate to severe psoriasis. They act by inhibiting the enzyme dihydrofolate reductase, as you already know, decrease the folic acid synthesis and decrease the DNA synthesis. So because of the decreased DNA synthesis, there is decreased production of new cells. So either the new cells in the skin or the new cells in the bone marrow. So it has both anti-proliferatory effect in the epidermis as well as the inflammatory cells. So one of the most important side effect being myelosuppression. Okay, so other minor side effects are there. Other than that, the most important complication, most dreaded complication being myelosuppression. And also, since it is metabolized in the liver, hepatotoxicity is one of the important side effect. But methotrexate, it is one of the important drug used in psoriasis, and also uh, it takes a long time for the methotrexate to act. Usually, it takes around 2 to 4 weeks for the methotrexate to act. Next drug being the cyclosporine. Cyclosporine is the fastest acting drug of all. It's also called as a crisis buster in psoriasis. So usually within a week or 2 weeks, the action you can see the action of this drug. Cyclosporine is a calcineurin inhibitor, so it specifically acts on the inflammatory cells. So it depletes lymphocytes and macrophages in the epidermis and dermis, leading to its anti-inflammatory effect. Most significant side effect of cyclosporine are hypertension and nephrotoxicity. So those blood pressure and renal monitoring should be done regularly. One more important drug is acitretin. It is an oral vitamin A derivative. So acitretin, as a whatever these vitamin A derivatives or retinoids, as we say, they usually without causing any anti-inflammatory activity, it regularizes the proliferation of the epidermis. So the differentiation and maturation of the keratinocytes are regularized. One of the most important side effect of any retinoid is its teratogenase capacity. So it's totally unsafe in pregnancy and breastfeeding. So acetylcholine is one of the other drugs. Other than these, there are biologicals. These biologicals are they block the specific molecular steps. The specific inflammatory mediators are blocked, and they cause the resolution of the psoriatic plaques. There are many biologicals used in the psoriatic disease in the armamentarium, but the most important are the TNF alpha blockers, adalimumab, uh, etanercept, and infliximab. These are the most important and most commonly used. And the one of the complications, especially in India, being this TNF alpha blockers, they reactivate the latent TB infection. So that you should be very careful about, right? Okay. I think that's it. Uh, so it's a very easy topic when you know the basics and the fundamentals of the disease. As I told, you can read the basics of skin. You can understand any disease properly of in dermatology, and it's a very interesting topic. So you can read further. I recommend these two textbooks. Okay, textbook of psoriasis by Peter C. M. Van Diekerkhoff and Rook's textbook of dermatology for extensive reading. All right. Okay. So if you have any doubts, you can ask me. Okay. Okay. Someone asked me to repeat phototherapy. So phototherapy, what you do is you give ultraviolet radiation into the skin. Okay. So the concentrated ultraviolet radiation inside a chamber. Send the patient inside a chamber and is exposed to UVA and UVB. UV is ultraviolet. Okay, ultraviolet rays. Ultraviolet radiation. It is a spectrum, just like ultraviolet visible rays. Next comes the ultraviolet ray. So the ultraviolet rays, even the ultraviolet rays are further divided into different spectrums: A, B, and C. C being the strongest with highest frequency, and A being the higher wavelength or weaker ultraviolet radiation. So ultraviolet C, the normal ozone layer, which it blocks the ultraviolet C coming from the sun, right? So ultraviolet A and B you get directly from the sun. So what you do is you send the patient inside the phototherapy chamber. It's a box as I showed in the photo, and you expose the patient to 1 or 2 minutes of ultraviolet radiation. So what happens is, because of this high concentrated radiation, the DNA synthesis is hampered. So what happens? The epithelial cells as well as the lymphocytes, they both need to divide regularly. So the division of the cells, especially in the skin, it is reduced. So what happens? There will be regularization of the epidermal layer. I hope I clarified your doubt. Next question. Wavelength of ultraviolet A and ultraviolet B. Ultraviolet A, it's 340 to 400. Ultraviolet B is 290 to 340. Enthesitis is nothing but inflammation. There is a site where the muscle attaches into the bone. Okay, so the inflammation of that site is called a enthesitis. Is the phototherapy given only to the diseased part or the whole body? Whole body. Usually, if the only the palms and soles are involved, there are different phototherapy instrument which gives light only to the palms and soles. Otherwise, if only one part of the body, like only the trunk is involved, you can cover till the trunk and then give. Usually, the whole body is exposed to the ultraviolet radiation. When do we give methotrexate? In case, see, methotrexate is usually given in moderate to severe, like more than 10% of the body surface area is involved, methotrexate is usually given. Or in patients with less than 10% body surface involvement who are not happy with the topical or other previous treatments, you can give methotrexate under uh, Evaluation. Okay, let's discuss the frequency of ABC order. In common vision as boil, pustule, papule, macule, carbuncle, furuncle. I think we can take a separate class for that infections of the follicular infections. All right. Okay, what happens if we treat chronic psoriasis of the scalp? Is there any chance of see? What you should understand is usually any psoriasis doesn't involve the whole of the body. Okay, usually it starts with one particular area. It can involve the scalp, it can involve the extremities, it can involve the palms and soles. Okay, slowly and obviously it will slowly increase and it will extend into other areas of the body. So just if example, if only the scalp is involved, you can give only topical treatment. But if the topical treatment doesn't work, you have to go into systemic treatment, right? And once you start the systemic treatment, once you stop it, there are chances of it be progressing to other areas of the body as well. Uh, Complications of psoriasis. Complications of psoriasis, one is that erythrodermic psoriasis, extensive involvement of the body. And other thing is because of the psoriasis, there are other associated diseases. Usually, most of the times, the type 2 or later onset are associated with other lifestyle diseases like diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular diseases also. So you need to evaluate those in all the patients with psoriasis. And other than that, the if the joint involvement is there, is that's also one of the there will be is if the joints are not properly treated, there is chances of the bone resorption and destruction of the digits. Usually, the digit shortening of the digits and destruction of the digits are also commonly seen in severe cases of arthritis. And something called as arthritis mutilans, where the whole of the joint is destroyed, right? Uh, Long-term use of tacrolimus cause any side effects? Tacrolimus is one of the safer. I mean, topically, we're not using systemic tacrolimus anyway in dermatology. Topical tacrolimus is one of the safer immunosuppressants. It doesn't have much side effect. Only thing is localized immunity, since it is decreased, chances of infections are more. Okay, I think will long-term use of moderate potency corticosteroid for psoriasis cause Cushing-Coat features? Yes, it depends on the body surface area. So if you use moderate or potency or high potency steroids, depends on the surface area. If a child or a infant is having psoriasis and if you apply corticosteroid all over the body for a week or two, obviously there will be systemic absorption and there will be HP axis suppression, definitely. Okay.